as the smoke clears from the mushroom clouds and the alien saucers hover overhead, and people grimly ask, what is next? All I can really say is, I, for one, welcome our new alien overlords. The war is over, the aliens have won, but humanity still has to live with the aftermath. We often imagine the day of alien arrival as binary. Either they come in peace or they come in fire. In earlier discussions, we looked at aliens have contacted us, now what? Where the great mystery was how we might respond to the simple fact of intelligent life beyond Earth. Then in We've Been Invaded by Aliens, now what? We asked how humanity might fight, resist, and endure a hostile invasion. But let's suppose the alien invasion is over. The aliens won. Their fleets hang above our cities, or what's left of them, their banners are planted on our capitals, and their patrols march through our streets. The old governments are gone, or at least reduced to figureheads, and the Earth itself is now a client world of an alien empire. So, what comes next? The good news is they probably do not want us for food or labor or debased personal pleasure. Sci-fi tends to assume one of those three motivations, but they never really seem very likely to me. Unfortunately, that generally leads me to assume an alien would be much more likely to simply wipe us out, but there are other motives for conquest too. As those three, let's quickly recap why they are unlikely. Humans are just about the worst possible source of calories on Earth. Anything near the top of the food chain tends to be inefficient, but at least when you raise a pig or a cow, you only need to feed it for months or a couple of years before you've maximized the food-to-meat ratio. Humans, on the other hand, would take more than a decade, and we'd be a nightmare to keep as livestock. On top of that, we're probably not even very edible. So if aliens are eating us, it's not for nutrition. It's because they're gastronomical weirdos and, frankly, pretty sick monsters. Unfortunately, that also rules out the comforting escape hatch. They might just grow human meats in a lab instead. For the same reason you wouldn't expect Hannibal Lecter to happily switch to vat-grown substitutes, you can't count on aliens with that mindset to be satisfied by test tube flesh. They'd have to be too twisted to want it in the first place. The one silver lining, it's hard to imagine any large, stable interstellar empire being run for long by beings that deranged, so at least the odds are stacked against a galaxy dominated by cosmic cannibals. Next up is slave labor, and it runs into basically the same problem. Unless you get your kicks out of whipping sentient workers, it's just not practical. For brute force tasks, robots are vastly more efficient, tireless, and obedient, and for anything that actually requires intelligence and dedication, you don't want reluctant slaves doing it. You want loyal citizens, skilled employees, or again, machines. The other one is personal pleasure, and it too tends to only make sense if they're pretty messed up in the head. The two big ones in sci-fi for this are they like to hunt us, like in the Predator franchise, or they find us physically attractive. This is unlikely to ever be a near-human case of the green-skinned Orion slave girls from Star Trek, but more like the Princess Leia Jabba the Hutt scenario from Star Wars. And to make that mentally work, you'd have to instead imagine her wanting to keep Jabba around as part of the harem. It's also very unlikely any alien is going to find a human attractive or enjoy lording over humans more than their own kind, so why not colonize the planet with more of their own kind after wiping humans out? Remember that absent FTL, just getting to a new star system to conquer it is a labor of many generations, in which case they may take more generations to breed up more of their own people. As for hunting, that one is harder to dismiss. If we assume aliens enjoy the thrill of the chase, and many probably would, then clever, dangerous prey becomes highly desirable. Hunting another species instead of their own might also sidestep the ethical baggage of murder. The real questions are whether they'd be content with virtual reality simulations, and whether those who are not would really spend centuries crossing space just for sport, especially if the rest of their civilization frowned on that. And of course, there's nothing stopping them from hiring humans to play along in a hunt that ends with tranquilizers or staged defeats rather than death. Two notes on that. First, if hunting is on the table, it may be one of the more dignified outcomes. It doesn't imply torment. We don't go around torturing deer or turkey during a hunt, let alone the rest of the time. It also keeps some portion of the population trained to fight, and creates opportunities for plotting rebellion. Ironically, the mindset of a predator might even respect that resistance or desire it, and wish to match it evenly rather than smash it with overwhelming force. Second, we shouldn't assume an alien conquest fleet represents the will of some vast empire. A few thousand ships with a few million troops might be no more representative of their species than one lunatic with a gun is of Earth as a whole. There might be all of them in that faction and they are looking for some place to set up a new base and figure they can conquer us and turn us into allies, or servants. On the Kardashev scale, a true interstellar civilization could be billions or trillions of times larger than ours, and any force we encounter could just easily be a rogue faction, private enterprise, or religious crusade as a sanctioned armada. That means outside help might be on the table. Not all conquerors are monolithic, honestly none are, and history is full of empires where rival factions quietly aided the resistance for reasons of ideology, sympathy, or sheer opportunism. History teaches us that conquest is never the end of the story, merely the beginning of a new one. The war ends, but people still have to live, work, and raise children. Farmers still need to plant crops, teachers still need to teach, and someone still has to fix the plumbing. Alien overlords or not, civilization must stumble forward. The real question is, how do humans adapt to that new order? The aftermath of conquest. The first stage after any conquest is shock. Infrastructure is wrecked, trust in institution collapses, and uncertainty spreads. Imagine New York or Beijing under orbital bombardment, skyscrapers toppled, power grids gone dark, and millions displaced. Even in victory, the aliens would have to deal with the chaos they created, because an occupied planet isn't much use if it's starving and rotting itself into the ground. We can look at history for analogies. Genocide and replacement for dealing with overpopulation is not an unusual policy, but it's also not the norm either. Rome didn't just conquer territory and move on, it had to pacify, rebuild, and administer. The Mongols swept across Eurasia with fire and sword, but they also learned to tax, govern, and trade. The Allies in World War II didn't merely defeat Germany and Japan, they occupied and rebuilt them. If history rhymes, alien conquerors will face the same challenge, the need to stabilize their new prize. The aliens' motives matter here. A species that sees Earth as a breadbasket might invest heavily in rebuilding farms and cities. One that wants raw resources might focus on mines and refineries, leaving humans in shantytowns. Or they don't even care about Earth, as they want all the moons and asteroids, and are demanding we sign them over to them for a 10,000-year lease. A benevolent overlord species might provide medicine, energy, and infrastructure in exchange for obedience. A ruthless one might do the same, simply because they have no real reason not to. Whatever their intent, the early occupation will likely be messy. Some human governments might survive as puppet regimes, others collapse into chaos. Refugee waves would crash across borders. Remnant military and militias would likely continue the fight out in the proverbial hills. Black markets and underground resistance movements would spring up immediately. The aliens might try to cut deals with elites or scientists, while ordinary people wonder whether to resist, submit, or simply endure. Or they might skip that and dump some mind control gas or implant us with obedience chips. They might also be absolute masters of propaganda and sociology, so they really didn't have to work that hard to get us into line. Never assume an alien empire is only more advanced than us in weapons and energy. Alien rule and governance. Once the dust settles, alien overlords would have to decide, how do you actually run a planet of 8 billion humans? Or whatever number wasn't atomized in the attack. But even a small fraction of that number is not a trivial problem. There are several models. First, we have direct rule. Aliens impose their own governors, military police, and bureaucrats. This gives them tight control but stretches their resources thin. We should not assume all conquerors have trillions of soldiers to spare, even if the civilization they originate from does. Everyone's got a budget, and someone involved in that budget who is going to ask why they need so many troops and bureaucrats for handling some jumped-up apes. Next are puppet states. Keep human leaders in place but under alien authority like Vichy France in World War II. This gives a sense of continuity while letting aliens pull the strings. And your puppets often end up taking a lot of the blame instead of you. It also implies to the conqueror that you see some value in them and some place for them to rise, which is very important to humans. Generally, crime and rebellion amongst us happen heavily only when folks feel the system doesn't give them a path to advance. That's probably not an uncommon attitude in other social animals, which is probably where most technological civilizations arise from. Even if the aliens make it clear there's a ceiling you can't rise above as a human, so long as there's plenty of headroom under that ceiling, then a lot of folks will be fine with that, as is often the case with peasants and nobility. All the easier if, whether they're lying or not, they say, given time, that ceiling can rise. And now the aliens aren't the main enemy. Folks focus on knocking out the other humans above them, so they can ascend. While the rebels might hate them more than they do the alien conquerors, as dirty traitors and collaborators. Our third set of options are client states or protectorates, and honestly this is probably one of the nicer and more plausible options. Aliens set broad rules: no nukes, pay your tribute, don't rebel, but let humans handle most of the day-to-day affairs. I say plausible because it's pretty likely that high-tech civilizations emerge from critters who are both social and aggressive and ambitious, but also probably have an issue with wholesale genocide or xenocide. See our xenocide episode for why they might, by simple logic, have decided it was a bad strategy, even assuming they haven't got ethics against it, which I would guess most did. So they take you over mostly because it expands prestige and territory, makes them look more impressive, and keeps you from being a direct threat or from some rival grabbing you instead. But they don't really care about you much. You're a minor asset, and so long as you remain no more than a minor headache, they don't really care what you do, so long as you pay your taxes and hail the Emperor every 26.3 hours with the traditional salute of your middlemost digit. The last one that comes to mind is decentralized control. Divide Earth into regions and play them off each other. Some aliens might even encourage rivalries to prevent unified resistance, or because they thought it amusing or healthy or both. Each approach has costs, and of course they can be used in tandem or hybrids or stages. Direct rule risks constant rebellion. Puppet states risk corruption and divided loyalties. Decentralized control risks chaos. But aliens with advanced technology, surveillance drones, mind-reading implants, or orbital strikes might find repression cheap compared to historical empires. Alien technology would inevitably change daily life. Imagine ration cards enforced by implanted chips, or food distribution managed by orbital AI. Factories could be repurposed to build components for alien starships. Entire regions might be depopulated to create alien-only zones. Some stuff might be done even if it's unnecessary. Imagine alien aesthetics who believe that gluttony was the ultimate sin, which might have some interesting historical and biological origins, and thus had set their agriculture to be maximally efficient in calories and nutrients and utterly flavorless. They do not need to make our food the same, but they do it anyway and wipe out rebels caught growing fruits and veggies, and their black market is in mushroom farms and chemically made artificial flavors to avoid detection. Humans themselves would probably be categorized. Some are useful: scientists, engineers, translators, administrators. Others are neutral: workers, farmers, the masses who keep the lights on. And some are expendable, which might include scientists, since they probably have better ones. That expendability might get triggered because they resist, consume too many resources, or simply aren't part of the aliens' plans. Harsh as it sounds, this triage is common in occupations. Aliens, with their own values, might draw lines in ways we'd find shocking. The nature of alien governance would also shape our culture. Would they outlaw religions they found threatening or co-opt them into loyalist sects, or even leave them be out of a feeling of respect or a fear of a higher power? Would they let us keep the internet or replace it with a tightly monitored alien-approved network? Would they ban reading and education? These questions aren't just science fiction, they're the hard choices conquerors always have faced. If aliens ever do conquer Earth, it'll pay to be the kind of person who keeps learning and stays calm under pressure. That's where Imprint can help. Imprint is a visual learning app designed around the science of how people actually learn best. It blends text, imagery, and interactivity into short lessons that make complex ideas easy to grasp and remember. Whether you're exploring psychology, leadership, or decision-making, it helps you build the habits of thought that turn knowledge into action. And unlike mindless scrolling, this is screen time that leaves you genuinely smarter. In a few minutes a day, you can dive into subjects ranging from philosophy and communication to science and technology. So, if you'd like to prepare for an alien invasion, or just the next meeting, this is your tool. Try Imprint free for 7 days and get 25% off an annual subscription at imprintapp.com/IsaacArthur. Resistance and rebellion. Of course, not everyone would accept alien overlords. Resistance is nearly as old as Conquest. The question is what form it takes. Direct military resistance is probably doomed. If the invaders could conquer Earth, they can crush armies. But asymmetric warfare is another story. Guerrilla tactics, sabotage, and targeted strikes can tie an occupation up for years. A single human with a bomb or a hacked drone can disrupt supply lines or remove a key collaborator. Modern tech makes lone actors far more dangerous than someone armed with a spear. The occupier's technological advantage helps them seize and hold territory at first, but tech is easier to copy or steal than to invent. Rebels who capture alien gear, reverse engineer it, or repurpose it for sabotage become progressively more dangerous. Whole underground networks could form. weapons cached in caves, intelligence smuggled in encrypted bursts, messages passed mouth to mouth when surveillance is tight. In short, Conquest may be decisive at the start, but rarely ends with the last shot. The psychological effect of resistance is as important as the practical. Even if rebels rarely win battles, they keep the flame of hope alive. Not that they are always the nicest examples. Historically, rebel factions are often worse than the conquerors, or some factions of them are, and while fiction often paints them in a great light, we do get some examples like Glenn Cook's The Black Company and Star Wars Andor, which are both excellent examples. Aliens would adapt, of course. They might use overwhelming reprisals, as empires have done before, destroy a village for every soldier lost, a policy the Centauri adopt after reconquering the Nard in the Babylon 5 sci-fi setting. Or they might try Heart and Mind's campaigns, offering food, security, or even citizenship in exchange for loyalty. They might co-opt human symbols, rewriting history so that aliens are our natural rulers, and always have been. The battlefield of resistance is not just physical but cultural. Music, art, and stories could become weapons of defiance. Imagine underground songs mocking the aliens, or coded graffiti pointing to resistance safehouses. Even humor could play a role. Jokes about alien overlords could keep morale alive while slipping under the radar of alien censors. And then there's the long game. Humans are stubborn, long-lived, and good at waiting out empires. Even if the aliens hold Earth for centuries, resistance movements could simmer underground, waiting for a moment of weakness, a civil war among the aliens, new technology, or simply the patience to strike when the time is right. Given enough time, an empire will usually have a civil war of some sort, and that's a ripe opportunity for either breaking away or joining one side in exchange for better treatment or freedom. It's worth noting that if you've been part of an empire that's composed of many other species, we probably are not their only conquest, succession might not be our goal, and indeed you might be very loyal to that empire by now and just want your position in it improved. That's more or less the case for most humans alive nowadays. You're not really collaborators when your civilization's been inside a bigger one for 10 generations or 1000. Human collaborators, why they switch and what to do about them. If aliens conquer Earth, collaborators won't all be one thing. The caricature we get in Pulp, the greedy traitor trading his country for a pocketful of trinkets, is real enough sometimes, but it's only one corner of a very wide spectrum. Fiction rarely gives this much exploration or dimensions. Movies don't allow enough time for that, and probably the best I've seen in TV is actually an animated kids show, Exo Squad, which tends to carry some very mature themes in it for a kids show, and gives us a deep look at what humanity under an inhuman conqueror looks like, with nuances and shades of grey. History tends to reflect that. Most collaborators are human-sized, muddled, frightened, opportunistic, principled, vain, or traumatized. To make sense of them, start with a simple taxonomy and a little history. A useful mnemonic from intelligence tradecraft is MICE: money, ideology, coercion, and ego. The motives that make people flip. Money is obvious: survival, comfort, or enrichment under the new order, and at a wider scale an alien conqueror is in a better position to offer better technology and associated wealth. As we've noted, you aren't likely conquering another planet for slave labor, and historically it wasn't unusual for some sectors of conquered peoples to benefit financially. Indeed, in colonial eras where industry was being brought in, the sheer technological gains could bring widespread benefit even when the colonial power was sucking the lion's share of the profit home. Normally when flipping would-be spies, money is what you offer after you've already partially sold them on ideology or ego. Please take this payment for the risks you endure for the cause, but it strikes me as being a stronger prod here. Ideology covers those who generally believe their conquerors are better or who think collaboration will save their nation by accommodating inevitable change. For some folks, any shake-up of the current order is good enough reason to sign on, but one thing I've noted over the years is that people often assume aliens will be highly enlightened and coincidentally agree with them, and I've even seen this take the form of hoping they'll show up and set things right and teach the other folks a stern lesson. Presumably the aliens do have some sort of ideology, and it's not hard to imagine folks feeling vindication and kinship with an alien empire that shared their ideology. Indeed, I'd make the case that loyalty to a shared ideology is at least as valid as shared genetics. Collaborators might not always share genetics with us either. This is primarily on human collaborators, but some AI we've made or some uplifted animal and genetically modified humans might take sides with the aliens too. Our third is coercion, which is usually blunt but common. Blackmail, hostages, or the immediate threat of violence will bend many. This is one of the easiest to be sympathetic to, and to assume you'll be able to flip, but it's worth noting that folks who back down out of fear before are not likely to magically change their minds when the enemy is even more entrenched. And last we have ego, vanity, ambition, or the chance to be somebody in a conqueror's bureaucracy. Power is intoxicating. This is probably the other big one we see in fiction a lot, and unpleasantly maybe the easiest to flip back. The conqueror usually can win on bribes, so outspending them in the money department is hard. Ideology can sour and change and often flips exactly opposite, so it is on the table, and coercion can be removed by eliminating the source of it or showing how cooperation is futile. But ego and ambition tend to drive a lot of folks to the top, and most rebellions work best if you can flip a bunch of the folks in the upper tiers, which realistically is probably going to be by ego. They already have more money and power than the rebels have. They may be susceptible to coercion like blackmail though too. In a case like that though, they probably are not your willing allies, and they also probably not people you really want as friends. Mice is a good approach to figure out why people might turn to their alien overlords and how they might turn back, but there's a second layer people tend to forget: psychology and extremis. Witnessing overwhelming force or seeing the old leadership humiliated can produce a kind of moral dislocation. That's not just fear, it's an experience akin to PTSD, and post-traumatic stress disorder isn't about some injury a person took, but a peek into someone else's mind that showed them that they meant it, and realizing the world contains cruelty on a scale you had not imagined. People respond differently: fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and those last two can look like a collaborator. A person who fawns to survive might later convince themselves, or others, that they chose pragmatism over folly. Survival, guilt, and rationalization get braided together. History is not kind to collaborators or traitors. Winners tend to write history, and people are rarely fond of traitors even when they've turned to their side. Indeed, they are often not very likable people, but you're going to have to deal with them after an invasion, and then after a successful rebellion too. Retribution versus reconciliation is a choice a lot of civilizations have had to contemplate while rising from the ashes of empires. That could easily include aliens caught during the end of the war, or aliens who turn sides to human rebels for noble or selfish ends. Social and cultural adaptation. Getting rid of alien invaders might take a real long time. In the meantime, life under alien overlords wouldn't just be about survival, it would be about routine. People would still get up in the morning, go to work, send their kids to school, and try to keep the lights on. Even rebels have lives to live. The difference is who sets the rules. Education might be rewritten to glorify alien rulers, or to erase parts of human history they'd rather we forget. Some religions might be tolerated, others banned, and entirely new sects might emerge proclaiming the aliens divine, or at least divinely appointed. Censorship could become the wallpaper of daily life, as subtle as blocked search results, or as heavy-handed as alien censors sitting in classrooms and pulpits. Science and culture might paradoxically flourish or stagnate depending on the conqueror's goals. If they value us as partners, they might accelerate medicine, energy, and computing, making today's miracles routine. But if they fear us, they might clamp down hard, freezing innovation to keep us dependent. Yet even then, the underground has a way of thriving: outlawed art, banned books, and secret scientific experiments carried out in basements or caves. Generations born under alien rule would see things differently. To them, overlords would not be invaders, but simply the background of life. Some would grow up speaking alien tongues, pledging allegiance to alien banners, and considering rebellion a romantic anachronism, or even an unjust attempt to return to a corrupt previous government. Others might hold the torch of resistance, smuggling forbidden history to their children, telling whispered stories of free Earth by campfire or candlelight. The clash between those identities could shape entire centuries of culture. In many ways, this is nothing new. All of us are descended from conquerors and conquered alike, and disproportionately from the former, I would imagine. Long-term human futures. What happens next depends on both us and them. Conquest could be quite short. They might be some breakaway rebel or pirate faction of some greater realm from which a liberation fleet arrives only a few years or decades later. Or they might have a change of heart on the matter after a time. The kids of the conquerors often view things differently, as sometimes those conquerors later in life. Some paths look grim: gradual extinction through assimilation, sterilization, or neglect. Others look like survival: humanity as a client species, slowly building back strength under alien eyes until we're ready to stand on our own. There's also the hybrid route, literally. Genetic engineering, interbreeding if that's even possible, or cultural blending could create something neither purely human nor purely alien. History suggests overthrow is always possible, even against impossible odds. Empires collapse, occupiers falter, rebellions succeed. Maybe we bide our time until alien politics hands us an opportunity. Maybe we slowly infiltrate their ranks, becoming indispensable until the day comes we pull the rug out. Or maybe collaboration itself plants the seeds of a joint civilization, where one day no one remembers whether their ancestor was conqueror or conquered, and often several of both. In-game and speculative futures. After centuries of alien rule, what would Earth look like? Would it be a memorial planet, preserved like a museum for tourists from the stars? Would it be one province among thousands in an interstellar empire, its people indistinguishable from any others? Or would it be a quiet backwater, where only a few scholars even remember the brief period when humans resisted? Alternatively, humans might outlast the invaders. Civilizations die, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. Patience is sometimes our strongest weapon. Maybe our alien overlords collapse from their own hubris, or their empire fragments into warring factions and humanity rises from the ashes. And perhaps, just perhaps, centuries of shared struggle create something new. Humans and aliens, once master and servant, might one day call themselves kin, not because conquest was right or just, but because survival reshaped us both into something neither side foresaw. Again, conquest is never the end of the story, only the start of a new chapter. Whether we end up rebels, partners, hybrids, or ghosts, the story of humanity under alien rule is one more verse in a long ballad with civilization, and if nothing else, history proves we are hard to erase.